Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me on YouTube? Oh, great. You know what I did? I muted myself. Rookie error. I looked at my mic and I'd pressed the red button. So hence why. So we're talking about Iran, shock horror, as I do a lot. But there's been a lot going on. So if you're on X, repost it, retweet it to get ears and eyes on Iran. And if you're on YouTube, tell a friend to get onto the channel, Eternal Iran. It helps in terms of the platform and everything else. And I'll be releasing some podcast episodes under Successful Iranians via the Eternal Iran channel. So there are a few that I've done but I haven't put it out because of what's been going on with Iran, etc. So quite a few developments. And let's go through them. Trump, as always, making the news every day. So people look out for his Truth Social. So Trump makes claim that the Islamic Republic have agreed to everything. No nuclear, and that they'll be given the nuclear dust, the enrichment that they've done of 60%, which they took out with Fordo and B-2 bombers. They're going to get it. So they basically accepted everything. These were the tweets coming out from Trump today. So on top of that, we then have the Islamic Republic declaring that the Strait of Hormuz is open once again. So the foreign minister, Abbas Dalaya, of the Islamic Republic, said that he declared that the Strait of Hormuz has completely opened for the remaining period of the ceasefire. So the remaining period of the ceasefire is the 22nd of April, I think. But strong rumors that's going to be extended. And that follows on the back of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. And there are quite a few people that were annoyed by that ceasefire or upset by that ceasefire. Some accounts saying that Israel had been kind of strong-armed into it by Trump and the Trump administration in agreeing that ceasefire. Remember, the Islamic Republic said, one for all and all for one. They're musketeers kind of thing, saying that if there's no ceasefire in Lebanon, therefore there can't be any ceasefire. That was a precondition. Red lines and all that, right? So Al-Ghachi's full post on X, Abbas, says this. In line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of the ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by the Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So the Islamic Republic have previously declared the strait is open to nations that liaise with its military, remember. We've also got the US blockade still happening of Iranian ports, and apparently still remains even after this declaration by the Islamic Republic. And this follows on as well with the Macron the jerk and his meeting with Keir, Mr. Penfold, Prime Minister of the UK, talking about how they're going to open up the Strait of Hormuz, that the French and the British are going to combine to do that, as well as 40 other leaders expected to attend. I think Germany are looking to contribute as well in defensive operations in opening the Strait of Hormuz. So then the US Navy admits the extent of the mining from the Islamic Republic in the Strait of Hormuz. So before, there was rumors that the Islamic Republic had laid a lot of mines, then gave out a map. Then there was rumors that, in fact, there was no such mines that had been laid. Now the US Navy has issued an advisory warning to ships to consider avoiding the Strait of Hormuz due to the possible threat of mines. So Reuters, which has been unreliable, has basically reported on the advisory sent by the NCAGS agency. I don't know it. That the status of mine threat is not fully understood. Consider avoidance of that area. So people are saying it wasn't clear really. Was that an advisory that was sent before or after the Islamic Republic had reopened the Strait of Hormuz? Then analysts are saying the cost of what's happened with the Strait of Hormuz, where they're saying that the world has lost $50 billion of oil in nearly 50 days. A bit of symmetry there. So 50 billion for 50 days of the war with the Islamic Republic. So it's been 49 days. Can you believe it? Since the US and Israel had began their war on the Islamic Republic on the 28th of February. Unbelievable, really. In that time, the world has lost more than $50 billion of crude oil, according to Reuters news agency and analysts. And the aftershocks could be felt for years to come. So they're saying it's the largest energy supply disruption in modern history. And there could be a long fallout. It's almost they want it to be a fallout. And this is the problem, folks. And we've got to call a spade a spade. That the Islamic Republic have weaponized and successfully weaponized the Strait of Hormuz economically. Let's be real. That the Strait of Hormuz has been weaponized effectively by the Islamic Republic when it comes to what's been happening to the economies of the West, because it's so interlinked with global energy. And oil and energy prices going up is what happened with the war with Ukraine and Russia, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And I think the oil prices may have gone up to a height of $150. Certainly was around 115. And it seems to be a point where it hits the 115 that the pressure starts to unfold. And I'll say again for this particular live, that the US don't get any of their oil or energy supplies from the Strait of Hormuz. They're energy independent. They're actually one of the largest producers of oil and gas. You know, who's seen Dallas with J.R. Ewing and Texas? Well, it's true that they've got massive supplies. The UK even gets hardly any of its oil from the Strait of Hormuz. They get it from the North Sea and other particular parts. Jet fuel is where the problem is. But the Islamic Republic definitely has weaponized quite successfully, and I hate to say it, but you have to call a spade, this Strait of Hormuz card. What I'm shocked about, folks, is they said they were going to do this. This isn't shock horror, something new. They said that should this happen, they're going to close down the Strait of Hormuz. They also said it would be a regional conflict in terms of, what we've seen targeting the GCC. So they said very much what they were going to do, and yet I don't understand why the world wasn't better prepared for that. It's a thin slice of land area, but has big repercussions. Some of the GCC have been putting their oil and gas, redirecting it through the Red Sea. And then the Houthis, the James Bond villains pipe up, don't they, every so often, and says, well, we're going to join in if you go to the Red Sea, and we'll hit some of our missiles. But what it has had an effect with this, with Trump saying we're nearly close to a deal, And then you've got the ceasefire with what happened, what happened with Israel and Lebanon, and then the Islamic Republic in stating that they opened up the Strait of Hormuz. That at one point, the oil and gas price, the Brent crude oil price, went down by almost 12-13%, which is quite a big number. So it then went up a bit again, but at the moment we're trading about just under 10% down on the day on the oil price. So if you think about before this conflict, the oil price was around $68. Now it's trading $90. And then it has knock-on effects in terms of gas pump prices, what you see in terms of queuing up for your petrol, especially diesel, and then food prices, etc. So it all has a knock-on effect because we live in such a global world. Someone says here, they are taking advantage of Iranian people. People need to rise up and flip the table. Yeah. But Iranians did, didn't they? In January the 8th and 9th, and got massacred, around 42,000 at least. Second biggest massacre since Rwanda. But you are right there in the sense that it was always going to come down to the ground. And this is the final battle. And look, if the Islamic Republic survived this, it doesn't bode well. I have to be real. Because that would entrench them further, I would say. People argue the opposite. They're weaker than they ever have been. Agreed. Economically, in a terrible way. Agreed. The people absolutely want the end of this regime. Absolutely agreed. There were Iranians before January the 8th and 9th, and there are Iranians after January the 8th and 9th. However, this is a civilizational battle. This is a battle of, I would say, good versus evil, light over darkness, to use those cliches. And the reality is, should they win, and their version of winning is surviving, and surviving means taking on and overcoming Israel and US, the big Satan and the little Satan kind of thing, between the two of them, then that doesn't bode well, to be honest. That doesn't bode well. And that's why it's so important that victory was the end of this regime. Anything else, it emboldens the regime. Because that's their version of success. Their version of success wasn't military upon military, because they were never going to win that fight. It was to do this, to cause chaos and mayhem, economic damage, that eventually the US and then by consequence Israel would stop, and then they would survive, and they would then carry on. What's the first rule of the Islamic Republic? Is to survive. A bit like what's the first rule of Fight Club? Not to speak about Fight Club. So I'm just seeing some of the comments here. Okay. Someone says we have been betrayed. I'm thinking about that comment, because for a lot of Iranians, if this war stops and the boats go, there's a massive sense of deflation, because they want the regime to end and this regime to finish and not to be left with this regime. They've already done their threats to the regime, etc., in terms of, look, we're gonna, you wait till what we do to you after the end of all of this. Sick, but that's the reality. There's that quote, isn't it, that Iranians was asking for the bombs because they want this regime to end, but they didn't fear the bombs. They feared being left with the regime when the bombs stop. But this economic consequence is a big factor, because money rules everything, right? Sadly, it always has done, it always will. Money rules. Someone says support the Baluch on the ground, fighting the regime every day. Well, Baluch, Kurd inside Iran, they're all Iranian. It's Iranian. Iran is a country of diversity. It's made up of different ethnicities. It's the diversity which is the beauty of Iran. It always has been like that. Nothing new. When diversity and inclusion came into fashion, this has been happening in Iran all the way back to Cyrus the Great. So there's two ways about this, really. Is either people come out at some point when the conditions are right. I have no idea about that. Or some people say, oh, Iranians need to be armed, blah, blah, blah. Again, I have no idea about that. But one thing I am certain is that Iranians want the end of this 47-year nightmare. And to have Iran back, to have Pahlavi back, the Crown Prince, etc. But they feel heavy-hearted at the moment. Because it feels like a deal's coming. I mean, who doesn't think that? It feels like a deal's coming of some description. Because normally economics give you a clue. And look what's happened with the oil price. And look at the statements, how they dovetailed and what happened with the ceasefire, etc. I mean, does anyone think that the US will go back into this war? Because remember with Hesketh, the war secretary, he announced economic fury, as opposed to epic fury, I think is. So economic fury about the blockade, which has massive repercussions because most of Iran's economy is based on oil and gas. So someone said, Trump stumbled into this war because his bluff didn't work. He never planned for regime change, so decided to simply do what is easy, not what is right. Some people think that. And Trump can really spin your head. You think, what's he saying now? And it can look very much one way, can't it? It can look like, well, it looks like a fait accompli in terms of a deal. But Trump has never made a deal to date with the Islamic Republic in his first term to now, right? So someone says we have to organize something to get weapons into the country. Why was Ghalibaf not targeted? Well, Ghalibaf wasn't targeted because I've got a strong feeling that they had a phased process with all of this. That after the initial strike, which was incredibly successful, like taking out Khamenei and major leaders, they then wanted to see the reaction thereafter. The reaction was more entrenched and more belligerent. So they then carried on, obviously hitting their targets, etc., and try to work out to see, right, can we do a deal with this guy? Is there a Delcy Rodriguez inside Iran, like there was in Venezuela, right? Where they managed to find someone, take out Maduro, etc., and be able to do business, all of that kind of stuff. And Khamenei was long spoken about. I have mentioned this many times, that, if Khamenei goes, does the regime then unravel? Because he's the one holding it together. He had been, I think, the longest serving dictator in the world at that time. Originally was the president of the Islamic Republic, then got ascended to become the supreme leader after Rafsanjani, the White Shark, had orchestrated this. But it was supposed to be caretaker for a year. Then 37 years or more later, carried on being the Islamic Republic supreme leader and really built up the IRGC. But made so many parallel organizations within the regime, like 18 intelligence agencies, different parallel organizations within the IRGC, the Basij, security, all of that. so that not one entity could concentrate power and to do a coup. Because the reality is the Islamic Republic built this regime to last forever. Not to last for a few years, to last forever, right? To be revolutionary proof because they came from the streets. So why wasn't Ghalibaf not targeted? Because maybe they thought, okay, maybe this guy. And I always sensed that out of all of them, who was the more susceptible? And I thought it was Baldy. And I did think it was Baldy Ghalibaf that could be the most susceptible. Don't get me wrong. The reality is all of them, they have their hands in a lot of blood and a lot of evil. And this regime is pure evil. But there are more harder elements, and then others which are evil, but love the power and money and would be more open to do something in order to save their position and status because they love that more than anything else, right? So maybe they thought this guy, Ghalibaf, who was a serial loser in terms of presidential elections, he lost every single time. He even lost to Masoud, the cardiologist, the current president, who has absolutely no power. He's just a puppet. I mean, he's one of the weakest presidents of all time, is he not? Some people say, is it a big act with Masoud Peshkian? Is he the real power? And he's just putting a big kind of act to make out he's so weak and a puppet. I don't buy that. The real power, a lot of people say, is Vahidi, the head of the IRGC. And he utilizes Mushtaba, which I believe is incapacitated. I really do. Therefore, he doesn't answer to anyone, does he? He has the ghost, a supreme leader ghost that can't be decapitated. And also, what better use of that, right? In advancing and leveraging his position. And he's been on the rise. He's had 4 promotions. So apparently you've got the Vahidi camp with Mushtaba the ghost. Maybe Ejai is in that camp. And then you have Ghalibaf. Some people say Peshkian, Abbas, in another camp. One's more harder, and the other one is more kind of like, well, I kind of enjoy the money and the power and the status, and let's do something because it's all about keeping the regime. So Ghalibaf wasn't targeted because they've said it themselves, the US, that they needed someone to negotiate with. Trump said it often, we don't know who the leaders are. We don't know who to negotiate with. We've taken out so many of their leaders. Well, they did identify this guy. And he's making out he's like the main man, isn't he? He's tweeting away like a trooper. Apparently he outsources his Twitter to a guy in the US. The word has it. He has some bizarre tweets if you look at it in English. It just doesn't match up. But anyway, he's positioning himself as the man. I am the man. And, there's some statements made in terms of the new regime are smarter, they're more accommodating. We've had regime change. No, we haven't had regime change. That's the biggest baloney of all, right? That's the biggest gaslighting of all. The same head of judiciary, the same head of the police, the same head of the parliamentary, the same foreign secretary, the same president, the same ghost of the supreme leader, the same support to the proxies, the fact they still have the nuclear dust, the fact they still have the nuclear, there's still the fact they have missiles, still the fact they have their drones. Yes, have they been beaten up? Yes. Have they had a lot of strikes and hits across Iran? Absolutely. And there's been a digital blackout for a long time. So let's go to the comments whilst I'm doing a monologue. So someone says here, how can the US even think about trusting the mullahs? That's true. I mean, they don't trust them, do they? They're not stupid, right? Is whether they've got the appetite for regime change. Look, I'll be real with you. I'm always Sam. People like to say, oh, I'm 100% right all of the time. Aren't I clever? Right? Anyone who says they know exactly what's going on is either within that camp, which is only a few people, Rubio, Bibi, Trump, Hesketh, Hexef, whatever his name is, Pete, the war secretary guy, and Chairman Kane, isn't it? The head of the army. It's probably like it's probably, and the CIA director, Radcliffe. There's probably about probably a dozen people or more that truly know. Otherwise, it's just educated guesses, isn't it? And I have to be real, they've been a little bit more stickier than I had anticipated, especially after the 12-day war. And they have seemingly been more stickier and resilient. And I think it's because of this Strait of Hormuz card that has emboldened them, because often conflicts, right, wars, they only end when you break the will of the other. It's a battle of wills. Who wants it more? Who's prepared to stick it out further? And I think they banked on the fact that Trump ordinarily doesn't he doesn't do long wars, so they'll be able to stick it out. But at what cost? Because if the economy collapses, then it has a real effects on the regime, because the regime then can't pay the Basij, they can't then pay the security forces, etc., which then fundamentally affects the regime being able to operate, because they're only in power because of the security apparatus. Let's be real. So they don't trust them. Is whether they have got the appetite to see it through. And I'll also be real with you here again, that Trump has done it longer than I expected. Of course, we want regime change, because without that, it's a defeat as far as I'm concerned. The only way it's not a defeat for the US is if they have a surrender deal, where if the Islamic Republic give up the nuclear, give up the nuclear dust, give up their ballistic missiles, then that's surrender. Then that's a victory for the US. Even if they give up their nuclear, Trump could still spin it as a victory, right? If they say we give up our nuclear weapons and we're giving the dust, the nuclear enrichment to you, the US, he could spin that as a victory. But in the absence of that, it's a defeat in terms of the main objectives. And that's not what we want, because that then emboldens the Islamic Republic. It then emboldens all these jihadis everywhere, etc. No, we won, right? And that's why it's a civilizational battle with what's going on. So someone says here, Trump just shuffled the deck a bit. Yeah. And then wanted to see what happens thereafter. Look, there's only regime change when the word Islamic is coming out of Iran, right? That it's Iran again. It's not the Islamic Republic of Iran. That it's not the mullahs that are running the Islamic that are running Iran. That there's no supreme leader. Can you believe you have a supreme leader in 2026? Only countries like North Korea have a supreme leader, right? It's just shocking, man. The country that was the cradle of civilization and poetry and philosophy of Rumi, of Hafez, of Omar Khayyam, of Ferdowsi, that has ended up with this rabble. What humiliation. Really is. And it's because there's a quality that has been missing in Iran, and it's not all Iranians. And that is gratitude. And unfortunately in life, if you don't have gratitude, you rue to pay it. And human beings, we can lack that sometimes, generally speaking, Iranian or non-Iranian, where we lack gratitude for things until it's gone. And that's what happened with the Shah. It was only after people fully appreciated that man and what he did for Iran. And remember, the Islamic Republic had a first-class country in terms of everything that the Pahlavi dynasty had built that they inherited, you know, where they were able to do their jihadi stuff and their proxies. So someone says here, they'll have to show Mustafa at some point. Yeah. The IRGC can only avoid presenting him for so long before they're forced to explain why he can't appear. It's a good point. I mean, at the moment, they'll say because of safety concerns, that, you know, in terms of eliminations, etc. There's not even been an audio. You know, some people say, again, it's for safety concerns because they're able to track that somehow. No electronic devices, you know, Taliban style, you know, sending messages, paper messages like they used to thousands of years ago, etc. They could spin it, though, saying that, oh, he succumbed to his injuries all of a sudden when they get into the position they want. At the moment, the Supreme Leader Ghost suits, right? Some they say, oh, he's in full health. I don't buy it. Something's off there. Something's definitely off. And I think he's incapacitated to some degree. So then it says, not part of the controlled plot. Well, some people talk about when will a coup happen? And some have been disappointed by the lack of a coup. See, the issue is the IRGC was built not for Iran, but to keep the Islamic Republic. It's in the name. And they report to the Supreme Leader. So it has been built and recruited just for that purpose. And sometimes these jihadis and stuff, they can be quite durable. Where people are more disappointed is the Artesh, which is the army of Iran. Where are they? What happened to the Artesh, the fifth most powerful army in the world under the Shah? Whatever happened to the Artesh? The Artesh no more, by the looks of it. That's been the disappointment. Obviously, the Artesh is infiltrated by the IRGC. They just have different uniforms, right? But the rank and file are like everyday Iranians. They suffer. I think inflation, according to reports, has gone to 100%. 100%. And you only know the true effects of the economy once this stops and it opens up. When in a wartime scenario, when he closes down, you can put a lid on it a bit. It's when it stops, then everything starts to rattle. So people are talking about in terms of how come, excuse me, I'm boring myself. Some people are saying that, you know, how come there wasn't more weapons and stuff, Starlinks to people inside Iran, etc. Talk about the Kurds, and then there was that Trump message saying that the Kurds in Iraq had stolen the guns. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. You know, I've learned with Trump. I like Trump, but I've learned with Trump. If you listen to what he says every single day, you go mad. It's more what he does than what he says. And don't get me wrong, sometimes when he says some great stuff, you love it. But I'm not so sure whether that was deliberately intended to do something or was that in fact the truth, the real truth. The Kurds in Iran are Iran first. Again, country of diversity and all of that. So getting into some of these other messages. It's the same regime if they give up nuclear proxy support and join the world without sanctions. Yeah, it's true. Someone says Mustafa is dead. Another says Iranians are fighting not only the Islamic regime, but many other groups and governments. Yeah. Well, Khomeini, where did he live in the last few years of his life? Before coming to Iran, he was in France, sitting in a little chateau, having some mostakha. and came on air France. So, and then obviously the Jimmy Carter and all of that, Democrats, everything else. We can go down that lane, but these are trying times, important times. These are. So, folks, we're live on Eternal Iran, both on YouTube and on X Live. Got about 346 people right now live listening to Johnny Nash. Spokesperson for the IDF says claims of thousands of strikes on Iran and Lebanon. It comes as a series of fragile ceasefires. Ceasefires are mostly bringing a stop to fighting in the region. The IDF says Operation Lion Roar, according to their spokesman, killed 28 Iranian commanders from its senior leadership, launched more than 10,800 strikes in total, destroyed around 250 air defense systems, and removed approximately 60% of the ballistic missile launch platforms from use. So there's still a hefty 40%, and it depends on how much of those, because one person 60% of not that much is another person's 40%, right? So 700 people, 5. So people are saying people are welcoming the Strait of Hormuz opening because of the economics, but shipping firms aren't celebrating yet. They're still cautious about sailing through the Strait of Hormuz, despite claims of the Iran. But then they contradicted themselves about saying, "Oh, you're going to have to pay a toll." And then Trump did the tweet, didn't he, about removing? Oh God, excuse me, folks. They say when you yawn, you need to get more oxygen. So Trump says that both the US and the Islamic Republic are clearing the mines together. I find that hard to believe. So Dow Jones shoots up, oil prices tumble down. And a lot of people think this deal's coming. Then Europe is saying the deal won't come. It'll take them a very long time. They'll just sign a memorandum of understanding. Then there were reports of 20 billion being given to the Islamic Republic as part of a deal to stop enrichment. But Trump then later denied that by saying that no financial incentive will be given at all in any deal, because he's very aware of what Obama did in terms of money in 2009. So let's catch some of the latest headlines on this live. Where are we? Bear with me, folks. So they're saying the blockade's still there. Someone says 42,000 dead. They did not die for a nuclear deal. I said this before. They did not die for the Strait of Hormuz. They died to win freedom from the monstrous Islamic Republic. That's true. So, Islamic Republic military source told English, God's sake, man, told Tasnim agency that the Islamic Republic planned to attack Israel last night at 8 p.m. and had completed all preparations but reversed course after Trump's ceasefire declaration at 7 p.m. So they're trying to take credit for the Lebanese ceasefire. They're trying to make out that Trump is doing what he's told with this regime. That Trump some people say, does Trump want this deal more than the regime? Others say no, the regime's weak. They're desperate for the deal. So there's reports here of journalists and stuff saying, I just spoke to the president on the phone. He said Iran has agreed to an unlimited suspension of its nuclear program, and that the US is not going to release any frozen Iranian funds. No years, unlimited. The president said, when I asked whether Iran had agreed to suspend its nuclear program indefinitely or whether it was a 20-year suspension, the president told me he had not declared whether he wanted Vance to lead the next round on in-person Iran talks. I haven't made that determination yet. It'll be in a group. JD might be one of them, with Steve and Jared. We have a good team. JD's good. Although JD Vance is not popular with Iranians, to be honest. I don't think it's that popular with people in Israel either. Most of the points are finalized. It'll go pretty quickly, the president said. When I asked whether the Iran deal had been finalized, he said in-person talks will probably take place this weekend. So in-person talks are taking place this weekend, apparently, in Islamabad. I asked what assurances he had that Hezbollah would abide by the ceasefire in Lebanon. We're going to get along, hopefully, with everybody. And we're going to straighten out Lebanon. And we're not going to be bombing the hell out of Lebanon. Not going to let anybody to do that. Trump to Reuters, the US will easily enter Iran and take its enriched uranium. What do we think about that? What do we think about that? Trump to Reuters, the US will easily enter Iran and take its enriched uranium. Someone says, like the strait was opened by the regime. Then someone else says, sometimes he says they will take out the nuclear dust, sometimes enriched uranium. Another says, then what's all the fuss about? Why does he need help of NATO then? Why does he go furious over little things? Because I think it's also a point, right? If you're there for like your allies when it comes to Ukraine, and then you say, right, I'm dealing with the Islamic Republic, which are the Nazis of our times, and this regime, then give me some help. You know, we're 2/3 of NATO is us, the US. And then when all of them kind of go shy or stop their airspace being used, I think you kind of get annoyed and feel let down. I think that's human nature, right? Did he say anything about the sanctions? No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. So there's ship traffic. So ship traffic resumes in the Strait of Hormuz after reopening today. So it looks busy. I see a lot of green fins and a lot of red fins on a map. That's your analysis on shipping data from me, not an expert. But it looks busy to the eye, right? Looks busy to the eye. Someone says here, the regime keeps humiliating Trump. The regime keeps humiliating Trump right after every post he makes. It's getting stupid to watch. It's true, though. It is true. Israeli sources, US and the regime are on the verge of an agreement to remove enriched uranium from Iran. They will also end uranium enrichment by Tehran. The president and the foreign minister favor a deal, whilst the IRGC object for now. It's been reported by Kian News. And apparently, within the regime, they're fighting. They're fighting. They're not happy about this in terms of details about giving up enrichment, the nuclear. They're not liking any of that. So it's causing infighting, folks. It's causing infighting within the regime. I still say, a bit like how the regime was never the same, the Quds force was never the same after Soleimani. The regime will never be the same after Khamenei. You can bookmark that. I'm pretty confident of that prediction. An analyst says if Mujtaba Khamenei, which I think is incapacitated, but let's say Vahidi, who then has Mujtaba there, the ghost, don't then bless this deal, then there's not going to be a deal. Because Pezeshkian and Abbas and co aren't really the end decision makers, right? But then the boats keep coming in. Bush will be there, the carrier. And what? Another 10,000 troops as well. Economics is paying a big thing because they're holding the world to ransom, aren't they? This is the reality. So someone says here, I'm hearing from US government close sources. You know, people say these sources, but they don't then say who the sources are. I know journalists historically did that, but people do take that as cover. My sources. Anyway, this guy, I'm hearing from my US government sources close to the Trump administration. They're very pleased with Qarabakh and believe he can be their preferred leader within the regime. He's cooperating and collaborating closely. He has not only opened the Strait of Hormuz, but is also expected to hand over the regime's shipment of 60% enriched uranium to the United States. He's loyal to the US government. They support him. The 82nd Airborne Division of the US Army will go to Iran to retrieve the shipment. What do we think about that? You know, the hardliners won't like any of that, right? About Ghalibaf, think that Ghalibaf's a bloody traitor. That's what they'll be thinking. So he keeps insisting that the enriched uranium will not involve US ground troops, but when asked who would retrieve it, Trump would only say our people, according to CBS. Plot thickens. Look, if they take their enrichment, right, and their nuclear, and their ballistic missiles is severely curtailed and incapacitated, we want the end of the regime, right? And most Iranians, and I think most people do, apart from those that are doing business or in cahoots kind of thing, and jihadis, then that would be tantamount to surrender, because throughout they've always insisted to have the nuclear. So if you don't have the nuclear and you don't have much of your ballistic missiles, then what are you? What are you left? Apart from terrorizing Iranians inside Iran. You're not a power at all. And you haven't got anything to really threaten people about, because they'll eventually work out the Strait of Hormuz, and that won't be able to be weaponized ever again. And that's it. The nuclear is the ultimate insurance policy because of what happened in North Korea, because once they went nuclear, you couldn't do anything about it. Someone says delivering chemical weapons through drones. I mean, they're good at drones, I must say. But yeah. So someone says here, a senior Islamic Republic official to Reuters, a preliminary deal, English, could be reached in the coming days, with the possibility of extending the ceasefire in a few seconds. I don't know what he's going on about that. But I've heard this preliminary deal chat, this memorandum of understanding chat. So, according to Trump, US and the Islamic Republic delegations will be meeting this weekend to finalize the peace deal, being reported by CBS. In addition, all enriched uranium in Iran will be removed and brought to the US, but no troops will be involved. So who's doing that then? It won't be the Israelis. And if it's not the US, what is the IRGC just saying here? Doesn't make sense, does it? Does not make sense. Then another official, it just speaks with so many different faces, this regime. To the Reuters, again, no agreement has been reached on the details of the nuclear issues. So someone says Russians are going to be overseeing Iran's nuclear weapon plans, but that won't be accepted to the US. Someone says on YouTube that. So we're on Eternal Iran YouTube, folks. Eternal Iran YouTube. I heard rumors that it might go to India, but I don't think the regime will accept that. They won't accept Turkey either, because Turkey and Russia will just be shipped back in, right? They won't accept it going to Russia. The Islamic Republic could propose that, but they won't accept that. So you wonder who then? Someone says here that this oil price is too suspicious because it has dropped big time. I think a deal has been made between the US and the Islamic Republic. That's why I think a little bit, sadly. Some kind of understanding memorandum. This is not what Iranian people want. No. And let's hope we are not moving towards a nightmare scenario where Iranian people are left alone with this regime again. So true. So true. But then someone says, no, the Islamic Republic still has the blockade on it. It's just that Iran has no power to blockade themselves anymore. So this person says, no, the Islamic Republic is still blockaded, but it's just that the Islamic Republic has no power to blockade themselves anymore, because they haven't hit the GCC, have they? I know we're in a ceasefire, but still. So someone says here, I just watched Putin saying the plan to assist Iran with the development of nuclear power, and they promised to prevent them developing nuclear weapons. Well, Putin's promise and all that, folks. Come on. Like with Ukraine, you can take that. And I wouldn't trust anything when it comes to that. Definitely weird. Prices have tanked though. Well, it would tank, but it's tanked a lot, which is good for the world. But he's adamant they've stopped enriching and they're giving up the dust. They agreed to everything. He told the outlet of News Nation, White House correspondent. Let's see, folks. Let's see. So the frozen funds of this Iran is in Qatar and elsewhere. Qatar used to be the brother from another mother, but then kind of fell out after being hit many times. So apparently, Iranian media says, Islamic Republic media rather, says the US and Israeli commercial ships are still banned from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't surprise me with Israel, but US. But then do US use it? Because they don't get the oil from there. So Bibi Netanyahu says the fight against Hezbollah is not complete. Someone says here the problem with Trump is he's speaking to the technocratic wing of the Islamic Republic, ready for rebranding and opening up to the West economically, but not realizing the IRGC faction has not agreed fully to these concessions. He will find out the hard way after the deal. You can see some logic to that point, really. So, all right. So this is a live that we've had a good chinwag for an hour. Iran Situation Room. We've had over 500 people go through this live on X and on YouTube. If you do like and want to support, subscribe, join Eternal Iran, the YouTube channel. That would help in able to do these things. And because at the end of the day, distribution of message and distribution is important, right? Because if you're just talking to yourself, then there's no impact in that. So I want to thank you all. Until the next one.